Okay, so this movie came out just recently, and at first, Warner Brothers was going to release it into or drop it into Max, and it was not going to be in theaters. They decided they're going to drop it, actually release it in theaters. So that's what they did. So now it's out now. I mean, ultimately, it was getting some decent reviews, some pretty good reviews, and the review that I'm going to do here, it's like I said, it's a non-spoiler thing. So I always do, the positives, and then I do the negatives. First, positive thing, something that's been a bit of a pattern. The lead, so Zolo Maridueña, who is in Cobra Kai, as the lead, so he was never an issue for me. I bought into the idea that he is Jaime Reyes, and I think that casting directors and filmmakers overall have been good when it comes to casting their leads. And Maridueña, Zolo from Cobra Kai, works here. So he was perfectly fine as the lead character. I completely bought into everything. It's a positive thing for me. Another positive thing here that I'll include here is the family. Now, the family is a positive, but it's also a negative. And then I'll get into that in just a bit. But I'm just going to mention this. So the dynamic between the lead character and the rest of the family are the stronger elements of the movie. I'm going to go into this whole thing, so just bear with me here. So as myself, a Mexican American, I appreciated many of the references presented in this movie. There were references that brought me back to like my childhood. Like there's some music and even some TV shows that are presented here in like an Easter eggs. That's kind of brought me back to the 90s and stuff like that. And I think for a lot of like Hispanics growing up during that time in the 90s, 80s, and so forth. Now, the director of the film, his name is Angel Manuel Soto. Now, he's not Mexican, but he comes from, Puerto Rican roots. Going back to the whole family stuff. So some of the characters in the family reminded me of either family members of mine or of people that I have met and interacted with in the past. So the film definitely worked when it comes to establishing this Hispanic Latino culture in America. And some of the actors portraying the family, whom I recognize, were actors like Damien Alcazar. So he played the dad. In Blue Beetle. He was in a couple of seasons of Narcos. So that's where I recognize him. And then Adriana Barraza, she was in Babel, the movie that came out in 2006, which got her an Oscar nomination. And that movie actually got a lot of Oscar nominations and so forth, like Best Picture and everything. She was in this, who plays the grandma. So she got an Oscar nomination for that movie, for Babel. So that's some of the positive things when it comes to the family. Now, another thing here, which is still connected to the family, is let's get the George Lopez thing out of the way here. So, like, overall, he had many decent moments of comic relief, as you would expect in anything, because he's a comic. We all know him as a comedian and things like that. So he's definitely the comic relief in this. He definitely felt like a supporting character, though, because considering that George Lopez was the most recognizable name of the family members, I was hoping it wouldn't turn into like a George Lopez show, like a George Lopez movie, because he's the most recognizable name of the supporting family characters. So I'm glad that he wasn't like, obviously you recognize him right away, but he didn't like stand out like, it's George Lopez in a Blue Beetle movie or whatever. It's still focused on the lead, which is Zolo Maridueña's character. Although not all of his jokes landed though. But that's kind of overall though, throughout the whole movie, that some of the jokes just didn't land. So that's a positive there. So before we get into the negatives, Matthew, do you have any positives yourself that you wanted to add today?
My only positive that you didn't really mention was I like the action a lot in this movie. I feel like it was very creative at times, and I think someone said that like this is how Green Lantern should have fought in that one movie that we don't talk about. But yeah, I did like the action a lot. And
are you talking about the Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, the action was just very enjoyable, and especially towards the end when he it was cool.
Some of the action stuff, like the whole thing with the bus, that was kind of different. That was a little different. I mean, we see it in the trailer, so it wasn't like, I think it would have been more of a shocking thing or more of a surprising thing had we not seen that in the trailer. but with the bus that he just like stands there and then he kind of like breaks through in the middle of the bus, not affecting anyone else basically. But so that would have been better if it was not in the trailer, but that's a different thing that they did when it comes to the action and stuff like that. So I'm gonna move on to the negatives. So actually there are more negatives than there are positives, so I'll just mention that. Okay, so the first negative thing here I'm gonna have to say is surprisingly Susan Sarandon. Now I know she's a good actress, she's an Oscar winner after all, but her performance in this movie was just terrible. She was bad. Now you let me know in a little bit, Matthew, if you agree with this or not, but
Maybe.
I don't know if the way her character was written was the reason why she was terrible, or if Susan Sarandon was just phoning it in for the role. If she's just, cashing a paycheck. I mean, obviously all actors are there for a paycheck, but I know some of them are also trying to, establish themselves in Hollywood and so forth. Obviously, she's well established in Hollywood. Like I said, she's an Oscar winner. She's been around for decades. But she was not good in this. And I just don't know if it's the way it was written or it's just she just didn't care that much. I would go as far as to say that she is one of the, if not the worst thing of the movie. That's how far I would go with that. I would go when it comes to, he's kind of like the henchman. This is a character that you see here on screen. He was the better villain, in my opinion. And while he was supposed to be like the muscle, his overall development was better and more interesting than Susan Sarandon's character, because her development, her reason for doing things is typical. It's the shit that we've seen before. His character was more interesting than Sarandon's, like I said. And this character is played by Raúl Trujillo. He was also the main villain or the main antagonist in Mel Gibson's Apocalypto. And don't get me wrong, he wasn't like a great villain or anything, but he was the better presentation of the antagonist in this movie than Susan Sarandon. So I'll say that. Another negative thing that I would consider this a negative thing is the typical origins. Okay, so the origins of Blue Beetle. So I consider that as a negative because even though this is crucial to the story, right? So the origin of Blue Beetle is crucial. It's necessary. So a lot of people have not seen Blue Beetle, do not know this character. So his origin is something that, we need to see. But his origin is the basic stuff that we've seen before. Is, like I said, it's typical. So those scenes are kind of like, it kind of dragged it down for me because we've kind of seen this and it's very similar to the other origins that we've seen in the past and things like that. So that's why I would say it's kind of a negative, even though it is important that we get an origin about Blue Beetle, a character that is just not, that a lot of people don't know about in general. So I didn't really care for it so much personally. And when it comes to the origin part, the scenes of that is very similar. It reminded me a lot of the Iron Man scenes, Spider-Man scenes. There was even a scene that reminded me of even Black Panther. So that stuff just kind of like doesn't do it for me. Another thing is we're back here to the family. So I mentioned earlier that the family is, the positives, but also negatives. Overall, the jokes, or there's a lot of jokes and one-liners here. There's a lot of cheesy and nearly cringe-worthy one-liners that come mainly from the family characters. Now, I get what they're trying to do when it comes to some of these lines, these one-liners that they do, but it just didn't work for me. It just wasn't good. And then there's also another thing about the grandma. Again, I'm not going to get into spoilers here, but I was confused about her background. So when you see the movie, there's something going on with her background that she does certain things that is like, well, how would she know how to do this? Or like, where's that background from? Like, I didn't get like where she got that information from or how she was able to do those certain things, considering of where she's from and then how old she is and the era and things like that. So like I said, I can't get into the details because that'll be more like spoilery territory, but that part I was kind of a little bit confused about. Some of the jokes when it comes to there was a couple of like lazy toilet humor in this movie
Agreed.
that it's like, that's lazy. That's like lazy writing. It's like, do you really need to add this here? It's like, this is like a top or like a big superhero movie from DC that is like focusing on his Hispanic family, and then you add this toilet humor. It's like, it's not even that funny. Like, maybe little kids will find it funny because it's like easy for like a little kid to laugh at, but there was a couple of them in there that were just kind of dumb, and I didn't like. They don't happen that much, but it happened more than once. So that's definitely a negative for me, anyways. All right, so that was the negatives there. Actually, I'm actually gonna go back to you, Matthew, when it comes to some of the positive stuff. So what were your, if you have anything else that's different or positive, or you want to like address yourself that are positives?
Positives? Well, no, not any more positives, honestly.
So nothing more than what I already said.
Yeah.
And then how about negatives?
Well, I'm just gonna add on to what you said about Susan Sarandon. Usually when I watch movies, I don't really see the negatives until after I finish and I come out. But like, as I was walking out, I was just like, damn, she was terrible. Like, especially towards the end, like there were some lines where I was just like, what am I watching right now? Yeah, and then also the corniness, that was also another thing. Like some parts, some lines that Blue Beetle said were very much like anime protagonists at some points. So yeah, I did overall like enjoy this film more than like other DC movies that I've seen. So
yeah, which I'm gonna get into right now when it comes to like the overall grade and the overall thoughts about the movie, right? Okay, so we're getting to that level now here. Okay, so with the movie canon, we have the 3 S's system. See it, stream it, or skip it. So overall, I'll give you guys this. So I personally enjoyed the references in the movie, like I mentioned earlier, and while it has some similarities we have all seen in superhero films, I did like the movie overall. I would say that it's good. It's not great, but I would say it's good. I mean, like, this movie has, like, in the soundtrack, it has like this very popular 80s band music in the soundtrack, and then it has, all of a sudden, it has like Vicente Fernandez, Tucanes de Tijuana, they have Selena. I mean, so like, it's like all over the place, right? Now, necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, what superhero movie has these artists in their soundtrack? So that was different. So that was definitely something that was kind of nice and cool to see that they've added this in this Hispanic led cast here. But overall, Blue Beetle is a good movie. I'll say it's a see it. So that'll be my overall thoughts of Blue Beetle. And as you can see here, I mean, you can't see my face now because now I'm being blocked by the grade, and then you can barely see Matthew. But so mine is a see it, a grade B. And then Matthew, can you see yours right there? And then you mentioned it earlier, or you told me about it earlier.
Also see it, grade B.
So we actually got the same grades. So grade B. Matthew doesn't know what my grade ever is until I announce it here, but that was his, and it was like, oh, just like mine. So it is a see it. I'll say grade B for Blue Beetle, the first Hispanic led superhero movie, with a big studio like DC. Now, how is it going to do at the box office? I don't know, because I know there's a lot of people who are not really trying to go into watching any DC stuff anymore because we don't know what's going to happen with DC, right? So they're kind of rebooting it, they're kind of not. So just based on what we see here in this movie Blue Beetle, it's not connected to anything specific. Like, it could stand on its own, right? So it's its own movie. It could either be part of the rebooted universe, or it could also not be part of this rebooted universe. So this franchise for Blue Beetle, he could be in the new DC or not. So that was just a little thought there. And then also when it comes to the credit scenes, the mid and post credit scenes, so there is a mid and there's a post-credit scene. The post-credit scene is not important and it's kind of lame, but the mid-credit scene is kind of important to the story. So just so you guys know. So that was Blue Beetle.